Guardian Childcare is one of the biggest private childcare operations in the country, with 70 centres. So its CEO, Tom Hardwick, is right in the thick of the industry. He sees how it works for parents, kids and centre operators like himself. Tom Hardwick also sits on the Prime Minister's Childcare Forum, which was convened to help move the sector more into the education area from being solely a care industry. And Tom Hardwick joins me now from our Melbourne studio. Tom Hardwick, thanks for being with me.
Thanks, Helen.
Now, there is this thing called the Prime Minister's Childcare Forum with sector participants on it, including yourself. What is it and are you getting anywhere?
Well, the forum was set up to bring people from all aspects of the industry together to talk about issues, and the Prime Minister convened the first one to kick-start it. We've had a follow-up meeting since, and the issues are getting out on the table. Like a lot of these things, it's hard when there's a large group to, to make effective decisions, but the dialogue has started and it's good that all the various parties are at the table.
All right, so there are some serious issues in childcare. From where you sit, is perhaps the most pressing the affordability of it for families?
I think the most important thing is that we're on the right track with the quality reforms. I think most of the major players in the industry are very supportive of what the government is doing in transforming the sector from one of care to one of early learning and development.
Right, so you think that is a good idea?
Absolutely, and if you go and visit our centres and see our staff and already see the improvements that are coming through just since January, it really is fantastic, and I think it has reignited the passion for many of the staff in the sector. So I think most of the big operators, and I'm sure many of the smaller operators, are very committed to the reform agenda. But like anything, reform does come at a cost, and particularly when you are increasing the number of staff, increasing the number of qualified staff, trying to improve those qualifications, and then to attract and retain people in the sector who can become educators, that all costs money, and ultimately, if that cost falls on operators, it will inevitably flow through to fee increases, as we saw in Victoria earlier this year.
Right, so what happened to the fees in Victoria earlier this year?
Under the quality framework, the ratios for children under the age of 2 moved from 1 for 5 to 1 for 4. And in
so
Victoria,
one carer for 4 children under 2?
That's right. But in Victoria, the state government chose to make that 1 for 4 for children under the age of 3, which is above the quality standard. So we had to find a number of staff, as all operators in Victoria did, and the fee increases at our centres were between $6 and $8 a day just to recover the cost of those extra staff.
Right, so that's passed on, you say, to families because you had to pay those staff higher wages.
Well, we effectively had to have more staff in the centre. So, for example, in a 90-place centre, we had to employ 3 more staff. 2 of those were non-qualified staff and 1 was a diploma-trained staff. The cost of those extra staff was about $150,000 a year, and when you pass that cost across all of the places, it worked out at about a $6 to $8 a day fee increase. All
right, so what do you think should happen to try and perhaps stop those fee increases, or should parents have to pay?
I think the rebate is there, and the rebate is very effective in helping parents manage the cost of care. So for most people, half of those fee increases would have been rebated through the operation of the rebate system. If you are spending more than $15,000 a year on childcare fees, then you've maxed out your rebate and you got no assistance for the fee increase. So, the rebate is a good start.
Yeah, what would the normal spend on childcare fees be these days?
Helen, if you looked at the average fee across our portfolio is about $80 a day. So if a parent had their child in 4 days a week, then that would take them above $15,000 a year. We would see probably about 20% of our parents would be full-time, the majority are part-time. But there are plenty of centres charging $100 plus a day, and for those families, if you are using care more than 3 days a week, then the rebate runs out after 3 days.
You heard the Minister say that the government has increased spending, according to her, to help improve this affordability. Have you seen that?
if you look back to where we were, say, in 2006 and look to where we are today, the parents of today are paying less today than a parent was paying in 2006 before the introduction of the rebate. So there's no doubt that the rebate has been a huge assistance to families in managing the cost of care. The point is, though, going forward, fees will rise as the reform agenda continues to roll out over the next 2 or 3 years. And if we're not careful, then parents are going to say, is the economic benefit of returning to work, if it becomes too marginal, then why return to work? It's hard enough going back to work, dropping the kids off, getting them organised in the morning, rushing home at the end of the day to pick the kids up, managing the house. Like, it becomes very stressful.
What do you think should happen, Tom Hardwick?
Well, look, I think if ultimately you are genuinely committed to this reform agenda, you need to increase the support that's there for parents as the costs rise over the coming period. And so
you're talking budgetary support for parents, more,
yes,
as they call it, middle-class welfare?
I think both parties should be public in their proposed commitment to childcare before the election, not after the election, so people know where they stand. And secondly, in addition to the rebate, I think we do need to address the staff wages, because, you know, if you want quality, you need to have people being paid appropriately for their qualifications and to stay in the sector.
Yeah, Tom Hardwick, you might have heard the opposition spokesperson Susan Ley say that she would like that pay case to go to Fair Work Australia and be argued out. It seems everyone wants lowly paid workers to get a pay increase, but do you think, I mean, the government, i.e. taxpayers, should stump up a boost, or do you think, you know, people like yourself should?
Look, I think the reality is, Helen, that ultimately if wages increase in the current model, parents will see fees rise to compensate for that. And that's the reality. And so, you know, do we think it's fair that parents should bear the brunt of that increase solely? Probably not. Right.
So you would support, no doubt, the government kicking in and topping up the pay?
I must say I was a little bit unsure how that system as proposed in the press last week would work. I think ultimately someone has to say we need to address the wages in this issue so that people want to stay in the industry, and however that's done, the award rates need to increase, and some compensation through an increased rebate or childcare benefit needs to be put in place to compensate for that.
All right, Tom, we're fast running out of time. What about the Crown land being used, or spare Crown land being used to get centres happening in places where there are chronic shortages? Now, from where you sit, are there chronic shortages in certain either suburbs or regions?
Helen, yes, there are. I think generally most people in most areas could probably find childcare. Whether it's their preferred centre might be another issue. But definitely in certain areas, particularly, say, the inner suburbs of Sydney, the eastern suburbs or the inner west of Sydney, where it is very densely populated, land is incredibly expensive. In those areas, it is very difficult to open new centres, and there is a lot of demand. And so the extent to which there are old scout halls sitting on land that could be redeveloped as both a childcare centre and a community hall with a scout hall in it, those sort of opportunities exist. The red tape to get through those types of planning issues is quite complicated. So the extent to which the federal government could get involved and help facilitate sites such as that, or spare unused land on schools or hospitals, etc., that I think would help address that supply-demand imbalance in some of those suburbs.
All right, do you think you're going to win that argument?
Well, it's a low-cost argument, so it's a good place to start.
All right, Tom Hardwick, we'll leave it there, but thanks so much for joining us and giving us your perspective.
Thanks, Helen.
And that's all we have time for this edition of Late Agenda. Stay with us for the latest news, and then Paul Murray Live. I'm Helen Daly. See you soon.